In the quiet suburbs of Asheville, a 27-year-old woman inherited what looked like nothing more than a crumbling house from her late grandmother. At first, Rachel Miller thought it was a burden she couldn't carry. But the German shepherd she called Buddy seemed to know better. On their first night in the house, as rain drummed against the windows, Buddy pawed anxiously at the corner near the old bookshelf. Rachel dismissed it, yet the dog's insistence hinted at a secret her grandmother had hidden in the walls, something meant for her alone. What could a loyal animal sense that even family had ignored? The answer would reshape her life. A pale autumn mist drifted over the edges of Asheville, softening rooftops and swallowing the outlines of distant hills. Rachel Miller stood at the edge of a cracked walkway, her breath curling in the cool air as she studied the house her grandmother had left her. At 27, Rachel was slender and of medium height, with chestnut hair pulled back into a loose ponytail and tired green eyes that revealed more than she wished. The house looked tired too, clapboard siding patched with boards of a newer color, a porch sagging forward as though it had exhaled too deeply, windows clouded with neglect. Rachel's chest tightened. Inheriting this place was not the gift people assumed. To her, it looked like one more weight she wasn't sure she could carry. Beside her sat Buddy, the German shepherd Evelyn had insisted become hers. Buddy was 6 years old, his coat a striking mix of sable and black, his body lean but muscular, his amber eyes sharp with intelligence. He wasn't restless like many dogs. Instead, he was patient, deliberate, scanning the environment as though assessing its risks. Rachel had never thought of herself as a dog person, but in the days since Evelyn's passing, Buddy had barely left her side. Sometimes, when she caught him watching her, she swore there was recognition in his gaze, as though he knew things she had yet to discover. Rachel's mind drifted back to the funeral only days ago. The service had been modest and dignified, held under a sky heavy with rain. The mourners wore black coats and clutched umbrellas, while the pastor spoke of life, loss, and legacy. Rachel had stood slightly apart from the family, hands folded tightly in her lap, feeling more like an observer than a participant. She couldn't trust her voice to speak. Michael, her older brother, had filled the silence easily. At 32, he stood tall in his tailored suit, with a clean jawline, slick dark hair, and an ease that made people believe he was the center of every room. His words about Evelyn's strength and sacrifice rang eloquent, but hollow to Rachel. He hadn't been there in Evelyn's last months. She had. She had brought groceries, rubbed lotion into fragile hands, and read from dusty paperbacks while Evelyn drifted in and out of sleep. That devotion didn't fit neatly into speeches, but it burned quietly in her heart. 2 days later, she found herself in the dim office of Bryant & Cole. The wallpaper was peeling, and the light above flickered like a tired heartbeat. Mr. Bryant, the lawyer, was a thin man in his 60s, with a sharp nose, neatly combed gray hair, and glasses always threatening to slide down. His suit was conservative, his voice measured, but his eyes were alert, as if testing the weight of his words on the people before him. Michael lounged back in his chair, smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. Rachel sat stiffly, bracing herself for disappointment. The will was read in order, and Michael's titiad. Inheritance came first, a property in the city, fully furnished, valuable, easy to profit from. Michael murmured, "Well, all right," under his breath, the smugness practically humming from his skin. Then Mr. Bryant continued, "To my granddaughter, Rachel Michelle Miller, I leave the house and land in the unincorporated township of Harperville, including all outbuildings, records, and associated property." Michael turned to her, eyebrows raised, a chuckle escaping. "Guess you get the spooky shack in the middle of nowhere," he said. Rachel had stared at the manila envelope Mr. Bryant handed her. Keys, a hand-drawn map, and documents that confirmed her ownership. The metal of the keys felt cold even through her gloves. She didn't know what to say. Now she was here, standing at the threshold of that very house, Buddy at her side. "All right, boy," she whispered, voice thin. "Let's see what she left us." She unlocked the door. The hinges groaned, and a draft of stale, dusty air rolled out. Inside, the foyer was dim, lit only by weak sunlight that filtered through grimy glass. Furniture sat beneath sheets like ghosts that had agreed to sleep until summoned. The wallpaper curled in faded strips. Buddy's nails tapped softly against the floor as he sniffed every corner, his body language both cautious and purposeful. Rachel wandered room to room, opening windows and coughing against the dust. Each space carried a trace of Evelyn. An old clock on the mantel, quilts folded neatly in a cedar chest, a faint smell of lavender soap lingering in the air. For a moment she allowed herself to remember summers here, sitting on the porch with her grandmother, cicadas humming and lemonade sweating in tall glasses. The memories softened the edges of the house, though the reality was harder. The roof needed patching. The porch sagged dangerously. The plumbing wheezed in complaint. Inheriting this house felt less like a gift and more like being handed a burden dressed in nostalgia. Evening fell faster than she realized. Rachel dragged a box into the parlor, stirring a cloud of dust, and Buddy suddenly barked once, sharp and insistent. He pawed at an old trunk shoved against the wall. Rachel frowned, curiosity stirring through her exhaustion. The trunk was heavy, its corners rusted, its lid reluctant. She fetched a screwdriver from the kitchen and pried the lock. The metal gave way with a groan, and inside, beneath a folded towel, sat a polished wooden box. Walnut, dark and smooth, its brass clasp still intact. Rachel's breath caught. The initials E.M. were carved faintly into the lid. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. Buddy sat close, eyes intent, as if he understood the gravity of this discovery. Rachel unfastened the clasp. The lid opened with a creak, releasing the faint scent of cedar and lavender. Inside, tied in neat bundles with ribbon, were envelopes. Each bore her name in Evelyn's careful script, dated year by year. Rachel swallowed hard, lifting the first one. It was dated the day she was born. She unfolded the paper, the ink browned slightly with time, and began to read. "My dearest Rachel, on the morning you came into this world, I promised that you would always have a place to come back to. A house can crumble, but it can still be a home. When the world forgets your name, the walls will remember it." Tears welled before she could stop them. The words blurred, not from age, but from the weight pressing against her heart. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. For the first time since Evelyn's death, she felt not abandoned, but chosen. The house was not simply wood and stone. It was a vessel of memory, a gift wrapped in mystery. Buddy leaned against her, solid and warm. Rachel whispered, voice breaking, "Grandma, what did you leave me to find?" Rachel sat at the small desk in the parlor long after the first letter had been folded back into its envelope and tied once more with ribbon. The wooden box sat before her, pulsing with the weight of years she had not lived, but that her grandmother had preserved. Outside, the evening was quiet, the mist pressing against the windows, and Buddy rested with his head on his paws, ears flicking now and then as if, even in stillness, he refused to be unready. She reached again into the box, her fingers trembling with both reluctance and hunger, and selected an envelope dated when she had been 7 years old. The handwriting was the same, Evelyn's careful loops and upright strokes, but the ink here was stronger, the paper less brittle. Rachel unfolded it and began to read aloud softly, as if the house itself required proof of the words. "My dearest Rachel," the letter began, "I remember your 7th summer. You would come to me with your hair tied in 2 little braids, your knees always scraped from climbing too high in the maple tree, and your eyes too bright to be contained indoors. You begged for stories, and I gave you books, and we sat together by the old wooden shelf in the parlor. You read slowly, sounding out each word as if it were a spell, and I thought, she will always search for meaning. You asked me if books could hide secrets. I told you yes, sometimes they do. Rachel lowered the page, the memory tugging like a thread. She had no clear picture of that summer anymore, only faint impressions of a younger self half believing that stories could shift the world. Yet here was Evelyn confirming it, grounding imagination in ink. She read on, her throat tightening as she reached the final line. Remember, child, the things you seek are not always before your eyes. Sometimes they wait behind you, patient until you turn. She let the letter fall into her lap, unsettled by the sense that it was less recollection and more instruction. Buddy had risen without sound, his ears pricked, nose tilted toward the kitchen. Rachel frowned, slipping the letter back into the bundle, and followed. The kitchen was darker, with only a dim bulb hanging from a cord. Buddy was at the far wall, near the old wooden cabinets, sniffing intensely. He gave a sharp huff and began pawing at a section of wallboard just beyond the stove. Rachel's heart skipped. The plaster there was faintly different, patched in a square the size of a door. She crouched, running her fingers over the uneven surface. Buddy gave a low growl, not of menace, but insistence, his claws scraping again with urgency. The letter's words echoed, "Sometimes they wait behind you." She stood quickly, her pulse hammering, then forced a shaky laugh. "It's just rot, Buddy," she said, though the certainty in her voice betrayed her. She pressed her palm harder, felt a hollowness beneath. The thought that Evelyn had left her not only letters but clues unsettled her with both wonder and dread. She sat at the kitchen table, the worn wood grooved by years of meals and conversations, and tried to steady her breathing. She told herself not to leap to fantasies. Yet the coincidence was heavy. A letter about secrets behind her, a dog restless at a wall, a soundless emptiness behind plaster. She felt the tremor of something larger, something Evelyn had woven into this inheritance. Buddy sat close, his amber eyes fixed on her face, as if urging her to act, but she shook her head. "Not tonight," she whispered. She wasn't ready. That night she unrolled a sleeping bag on the floor of the parlor. She had no furniture yet, no bed, only the thin comfort of fabric between her body and the wood. Buddy curled beside her, warm and steady, his breathing a rhythm she clung to. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, thinking of Evelyn's hands guiding hers along the spines of books, of questions about hidden meanings, of her grandmother's quiet smile. She wondered if Evelyn had meant for the letters to be discovered one by one, each leading her deeper, or if Rachel herself was forcing connections that weren't there. Sleep finally came in fitful waves, and in her dreams she walked endless halls lined with shelves, each book whispering her name. Morning arrived pale and damp. Rachel made coffee on the old hot plate, the smell grounding her. She sat at the table again, Buddy at her feet, and reread the second letter. The words seemed to glow with new urgency. The description of the wooden shelf, of reading together. It was less a memory than a map. Evelyn had been deliberate. She always was. The letter was a guide, and Rachel felt the pull of obligation stronger than ever. She glanced toward the kitchen wall, unease fluttering in her stomach. Later that day she went into town for supplies. The drive took her along winding roads lined with trees turned gold and rust. She stopped at a small general store, its windows cluttered with handwritten signs advertising apples, flour, and canned preserves. Inside, behind the counter, stood Sarah Mitchell, a woman in her late 30s, tall and slender, her auburn hair tied back in a bun, freckles dotting her pale skin. Her green eyes were wary yet warm, softened by years of holding both grief and resilience. Rachel had known Sarah faintly in childhood. She had taken over the store after her husband's accident 5 years earlier, raising 2 children on her own. The loss had etched caution into her smile, but it hadn't hardened her. "Rachel Miller," Sarah said, her voice tinged with both recognition and sympathy. "Back for good?" Rachel hesitated. "For now," she answered. They spoke briefly, Sarah offering a discount on cleaning supplies and coffee as if sensing Rachel's need. She moved with efficiency, her hands rough from work, her tone careful, but beneath it Rachel felt genuine kindness. When Rachel returned to the house, Buddy leaped from the truck bed, eager and alert. She carried the groceries inside, the silence of the rooms pressing around her. She tried to busy herself, scrubbing a counter, sweeping a hallway, but the memory of Buddy's pawing at the wall gnawed at her. By evening, she found herself once more in the kitchen, staring at the patch of plaster. Buddy sat close, eyes steady. She touched the wall again, felt the hollow echo. "Not yet," she whispered, backing away. She needed time, needed courage, needed to understand the letters before prying into walls. As darkness fell, she sat with the wooden box again, tracing the ribbons, the envelopes waiting like a trail of lanterns through a forest. She realized this inheritance was not only property, but pilgrimage. The letters were steps, each one opening her to something Evelyn wanted her to learn. For now, that was enough. She closed the box carefully, set it back on the desk, and leaned into Buddy's fur. The words of the letter still hummed in her chest. "Sometimes they wait behind you." She was beginning to believe them. The rain began late in the evening, thin at first, tapping against the patched windows like cautious fingers. Rachel sat at the small desk in the parlor with Buddy stretched across the rug at her feet. She had lit a single lamp, its glow soft and uncertain, but the electricity flickered now and then, dimming, returning, then wavering again as if the storm outside had unsettled more than clouds. She placed another letter back into the wooden box, feeling the familiar pull between dread and longing. Buddy lifted his head suddenly, ears sharp, eyes narrowing toward the hallway. Rachel listened, and beneath the rhythm of rain pouring there was another sound. A low whistle, like wind squeezing through an opening it should not have found. Her skin prickled. She rose, lamp in hand, following Buddy as he trotted toward the back of the house. The noise grew stronger near the kitchen wall, the same place Buddy had pawed days earlier. The plaster seemed to sigh under the push of weather, and the sound of rushing air carried through, faint but undeniable. Rachel's heart quickened. She stepped closer, and Buddy pressed against the baseboard, paws scraping, tail stiff with intent. She set the lamp on the counter, placed her shoulder against the tall bookshelf beside the wall, and pushed. At first it did not move, but with a groan of wood reluctant to betray its secret, the shelf shifted a few inches. Dust spilled into the air. Rachel coughed, shoved harder, and the entire unit inched away, revealing a seam of darkness behind. Her stomach lurched at the sight of a hidden frame, a narrow doorway masked for decades. A mechanism was embedded into the side panel, a wooden latch cleverly disguised as molding. She lifted it, and the wall seemed to sigh once more, a panel sliding aside with a reluctant scrape. Behind it was a stairwell, narrow and steep, descending into darkness. The air that rose was cool, dry, and touched with the faint scent of cedar and ink. Rachel froze, her mind racing between fear and awe. Evelyn had known. The letters had been hints, guiding her step by step. She whispered, "You wanted me to find this, didn't you?" Buddy whined softly, then took a step forward, his body low, alert, but not afraid. Lamp in hand, Rachel descended. The stairs creaked under her weight, but the construction held firm, sturdier than she expected. She reached the bottom and gasped. The room stretched wider than she thought possible beneath such a modest house. Wooden shelves lined every wall, filled with books, journals, ledgers, and rolled maps. A small table stood at the center with an oil lamp upon it, long cold but intact. The space smelled faintly of old paper and lavender, not the rot she feared. She realized then Evelyn must have arranged repairs long ago. Ventilation slits high on the wall allowed a gentle draft, and boards had been sealed carefully to keep dampness out. This was no accidental cellar. It was a library, deliberately preserved. Rachel set her lamp down and reached for a book. The leather cover cracked at her touch, yet the pages inside were dry. She chose a thicker volume with faded lettering on its spine and opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten title, Journal of Ruth Holloway, Midwife and Keeper of Traditions. Rachel's breath caught. Ruth Holloway was her great-great-grandmother, a woman Evelyn had spoken of in fragments but never fully explained. The journal's script was small, neat, and purposeful. Rachel skimmed the first lines. I record not for vanity, but for remembrance. These hills keep secrets, and so must I. The herbs gathered by moonlight, the births aided in silence, the families shielded from pursuers. These walls have held them all. Rachel's eyes widened. Buddy nudged her leg, sensing the tension that trembled through her. The rain hammered harder above, muffling the world outside. Rachel read more. Notes on plants used to soothe fevers, recipes for poultices, careful diagrams of birthing positions, and, woven between them, brief allusions to families taken in during nights of pursuit. She imagined Ruth, stern and resilient, standing watch while strangers found shelter in these very rooms. This was not only knowledge, it was history, hidden from the world until now. The journals, the books, the maps, all of it was more than she could have dreamed. Rachel sank onto the chair, her fingers trembling as she turned pages. Her grandmother had not only left her a house, but a legacy, layered with intention. The letters were stepping stones, and the library was the heart of it. She felt a swell of gratitude mixed with fear. What responsibility did this inheritance place upon her? She glanced at Buddy, who had settled near the stairs, vigilant but calm. It's real, she whispered. It's all real. The words echoed softly against the stone walls. She closed the journal gently, aware of the weight it carried, and placed it back on the shelf. Her pulse still raced, her mind whirling with possibilities. Above them, thunder rolled. The lamp flickered again. Rachel stood slowly, brushing dust from her jeans, and let her eyes wander across the shelves one last time. She knew this was only the beginning. The library was a secret Evelyn had guarded until Rachel was ready, and tonight she had finally stepped into it. She touched the stair rail, looked once more at the journal's resting place, and whispered into the silence, "Thank you." Then she climbed back toward the surface, Buddy at her side, the storm raging above as though the world itself had felt the shift in her life. The storm had passed, leaving behind a wet hush that clung to the air and coated every surface with the scent of pine and damp soil. Rachel sat on the couch in the parlor, the wooden box of letters resting on her lap. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for another envelope, this one marked with a date from a decade earlier, her 20th birthday. The paper was thin, browned at the edges, but Evelyn's handwriting remained strong and steady. Rachel unfolded it carefully, heart pounding, and began to read. "My dearest Rachel," it began, "by now you are 20 years old, no longer the little girl who used to sit by my feet with braids swinging as you turned the pages of fairy tales. I imagine you caught between dreams and duty, the way all women in our family have been at that age. One day, you will be faced with a choice. You will stand before something the world calls useless, broken, or unworthy, and you will wonder whether to throw it away or to hold it close. Remember this: memories are not garbage. What seems worthless often carries a weight that cannot be measured in coins. Guard what others do not see." Rachel pressed the letter to her chest, her throat tight. Evelyn's words reached across time, echoing her very dilemma now. The house, the journals, the secret library, they were treasures of memory, yet the practical world saw only a collapsing building and endless debt. She thought of her unpaid bills back in Atlanta, of the cracked phone screen she could barely afford to replace, of the rejection letter from her school district. Logic whispered she should sell, but the letter felt like a hand on her shoulder, steadying her in the storm of doubt. The crunch of gravel outside jolted her from thought. Buddy barked, deep and insistent, rising to his feet with his ears pricked. Rachel set the letter down and moved to the window. A silver sedan was pulling into the driveway, its tires sending up wet sprays. Out stepped Michael, her older brother. Michael Miller was 31, tall and broad-shouldered, with neatly trimmed dark hair and a clean shave that made his angular jaw look even sharper. His suits always fit perfectly, and today he wore a navy jacket that looked more suited to a downtown boardroom than a muddy yard in the suburbs of Asheville. He had always been the golden child, quick with confidence, sharper with ambition. Growing up, he had been captain of the high school football team, later graduating into a real estate career that fed his hunger for wealth and recognition. Unlike Rachel, who had lingered at Evelyn's side, Michael had visited rarely, dismissing their grandmother's stories as sentimental clutter. Success had made him impatient with anything he could not quantify in dollars. He stepped onto the porch, shoes spotless despite the puddles, and knocked once before letting himself in, as if the house were already his. "Rachel," he said smoothly, scanning the parlor. His eyes caught on the patched wallpaper and the sagging ceiling corner. "This place looks worse every time I see it. How are you even managing to stay here?" Rachel's jaw tightened. "I'm managing." Buddy growled low, but Rachel placed a hand on his back to calm him. Michael smirked, tossing his keys onto the table with a practiced air of superiority. "Look, I'll cut to the chase. You can't keep this up. Roof's leaking, foundations shifting, plumbing's prehistoric. You don't have the money or the skills to fix it. And even if you did, what's the point? No one wants a relic like this. It's dead weight." Rachel crossed her arms. "It's not dead weight to me." He raised an eyebrow, his dark eyes calculating. "You're sentimental, I get it. Grandma's little pet project, her fairy tales about the past. But you and I both know sentiment doesn't pay bills." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table toward her. "I had my attorney draft a buyout agreement, $12,000, cash. You sign, and you can walk away free and clear. Use the money to start over. Maybe move back to the city. Find a real job. No more rotting wood, no more ghosts." Rachel looked down at the folder but didn't open it. Her chest tightened. $12,000 was more than she'd seen in years. It could pay off her debts, get her a new apartment, even buy her a little time to figure out her future. But her grandmother's letter, still lying open on the couch, whispered louder than Michael's promises. Michael leaned closer, his voice lowering, persuasive. "Come on, Rach. You've always been practical, even if you didn't admit it. Think about it. This place isn't some miracle waiting to happen. It's a money pit. Grandma left it to you because she knew you'd take it off everyone else's hands. She didn't mean for you to drown in it." Rachel felt a heat rise in her face, part anger, part fear. She wanted to tell him about the library, about the journals, about the history humming in the walls. But something stopped her. Michael would never see it as anything but leverage to sell for profit. He would strip it bare, auction the books, flatten the story Evelyn had tried so carefully to preserve. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm not selling." Michael blinked, then let out a short laugh, incredulous. "You're serious, Rachel? You're broke. You're living in a house that could collapse around you, and you're saying no to $12,000? You've lost your mind." Rachel lifted Evelyn's letter, holding it out toward him. "I have a reason, and it's not for sale." For a moment Michael stared at her, his jaw tightening. The mask of smooth charm slipped, revealing frustration beneath. He gathered the contract back into his folder with a snap. "Fine, be stubborn. But when the tax bill comes and you can't pay it, don't expect me to bail you out." He turned on his heel and strode toward the door. Buddy barked once, sharp and unyielding, as Michael left without another glance. Rachel stood frozen, Evelyn's letter trembling in her hands. The rain outside had faded to a drizzle, but the storm inside her heart only grew. Logic told her she was reckless. Fear whispered she would regret this. But somewhere deeper, Evelyn's words anchored her. Memories are not garbage. She looked down at Buddy, whose steady gaze mirrored her own turmoil. "We're staying," she whispered, as if to convince herself. The house creaked softly in reply, as though approving her choice. The sun rose pale and uncertain, veiled behind the thin mists that curled across the yard. Rachel stood on the porch with Buddy at her side, clutching Evelyn's letter in her hand. The night before, Michael's offer had rattled her, but as dawn broke, she felt the resolve hardening inside her. Buddy barked once, sharp and confident, as if echoing her choice. She would not sell, she would stay. The house creaked under the weight of years, but Rachel no longer heard only decay. She heard challenge. She needed help, though, and she knew it. That morning she made her first phone call to a local handyman, whose number had been left scribbled on a note card tacked to the old pantry board. His name was Tom Jacobs. When he arrived later that afternoon, Buddy ran out to greet him, tail stiff but wagging cautiously. Tom was in his mid-50s, his frame stocky and sun-weathered from years of labor. He had a square face marked with lines carved deep from both laughter and hardship, and a short, bristled beard the color of iron. His hands were large, calloused, and nicked from countless tools and nails. He wore denim overalls, heavy boots splattered with dried paint, and a faded baseball cap that shaded eyes so pale blue they seemed almost gray. Once, long ago, he had run a small construction business, but the 2008 recession had gutted his livelihood. Now he worked job to job, carrying a quiet humility, but also a pride in doing things right. He walked slowly around the porch, his eyes taking in the warped wood and sagging beams. "She's old," he said, his voice gravelly, but kind. "But she's not gone. Roof'll need patching first, or you'll lose the upstairs to mold. Porch supports need bracing. Plumbing's leaking like a sieve, judging by the damp under the boards." He crouched and rapped a knuckle against the step. Not hopeless, though, just needs hands willing to fight for it. He looked up at Rachel, his gaze steady. "You willing to fight?" Rachel nodded, more firmly than she expected. "Yes." "Good," Tom said, standing with a grunt. "Then I'll start tomorrow. Fair wages, but I'll teach you as we go. A house like this doesn't want strangers fixing it alone. It needs its keeper involved." Rachel agreed, grateful for both his honesty and his offer to let her learn. Buddy sniffed Tom's hand, then licked his knuckles as if sealing the agreement himself. The next morning brought a different kind of visitor. An elderly woman in a wide straw hat shuffled up the drive, leaning on a wooden cane. She carried a basket of apples and pears, their skins glossy and fragrant. Her name was Agatha Brown, the neighbor who lived half a mile down the county road. Agatha was in her late 70s, her tall frame slightly bent but still dignified. Her skin was the rich brown of cedar, polished by time, her silver hair tied neatly into a bun beneath the hat. She wore a faded blue dress and sturdy sandals, her steps deliberate, but confident. Her eyes, though softened by age, gleamed with sharp wit and warmth. She had lived in Harperville all her life, raising 4 children who had long since moved away. Known for her sharp tongue and generous heart, she had survived the town's slow decline by sheer resilience. "Girl," she said as Rachel opened the door, "I heard you turned down Michael's money. Smart, if you ask me. He'd sell this place out from under Evelyn's memory faster than he'd sell one of his fancy condos." She pressed the basket into Rachel's arms. "Fruit from my trees. Eat it. Don't argue." Rachel smiled shyly. "Thank you. I wasn't sure anyone here cared." Agatha's laugh rang out, warm and amused. "Oh, we care. We just don't always say it out loud. Evelyn was my friend, stubborn as a mule, but she loved you. She told me once this house would test you. Looks like she was right." She placed a wrinkled hand over Rachel's. "Don't give up on it. And don't give up on yourself." Rachel's throat tightened. She nodded. "I won't." Over the following weeks, small gestures of support began arriving. A neighbor left a bundle of firewood on the porch one evening. Another slipped a sack of sweet potatoes by the gate. The town did not flood her with help, but it trickled in steadily, like drops feeding a dry root. Rachel spent her mornings working beside Tom Jacobs. He showed her how to hammer nails properly, how to measure twice and cut once, how to climb carefully onto the roof to spread tar over cracked shingles. Her hands blistered, her back ached, but each scar of work filled her with pride. The afternoons she reserved for the hidden library. Down in the secret room, she sorted Evelyn's collection carefully, wiping dust from covers, labeling boxes, and stacking journals by decade. Buddy often lay at the top of the stairs, head on his paws, guarding her silently. It was while cataloging the journals that Rachel felt a rising need to understand what she had found. The writings of Ruth Holloway, the medical notes, the records of births, and herbal remedies, these were more than family keepsakes. They were history. Unsure where else to turn, Rachel wrote a long letter describing the discovery and sent it to the history department of the University of North Carolina. She expected nothing. Weeks passed, and she nearly forgot she had posted it. Then, one afternoon, a reply arrived in the mailbox. The letter bore the university's crest and was signed by Dr. Samuel Green. Dr. Green was a historian in his early 60s, with thinning white hair, a neatly trimmed mustache, and reading glasses perched perpetually at the end of his nose. He had spent his career studying Southern archives, particularly the lives of black women healers and educators often overlooked by mainstream history. His passion was preserving voices erased by time. In his letter, he expressed keen interest and requested to visit when he arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Rachel greeted him nervously. He wore a tweed blazer with patches at the elbows, khaki trousers, and carried a leather satchel bulging with notebooks. His demeanor was gentle but intense. His handshake firm yet warm. Rachel led him into the hidden library, her pulse racing. Dr. Green stopped just inside the doorway, eyes widening. He reached out, touching a spine reverently. "My God," he murmured, this is extraordinary. Do you understand what you have here?" Rachel swallowed. "Not fully. That's why I called you." He turned slowly, eyes bright behind the glasses. "These are primary documents, preserved perfectly in conditions most scholars only dream of. Midwifery records, folk remedies, personal diaries. These are windows into lives history has ignored. This collection is extremely rare and carries immense historical value. You must protect it, Rachel. It is not just your family's memory. It is a piece of America's story." Rachel felt tears prick her eyes, relief and awe flooding her chest. Evelyn's voice through the letters, Tom's faith in the house, Agatha's neighborly wisdom, all of it converged here. She was no longer merely inheriting a crumbling building. She was carrying a legacy. Buddy padded forward, resting his head gently on her knee, as if affirming the truth in Green's words. Rachel looked around the library at the shelves and journals that whispered through time. For the first time, she believed she had made the right choice. The evening was heavy with silence, the kind that settled in after weeks of discovery and labor, when the house seemed less like a ruin and more like a companion breathing quietly with her. Rachel sat at the old wooden table in the parlor, the last envelope from the cedar box resting before her like a relic. The edges were worn smooth, the ink on the front faded, but unmistakable. It was dated the year of her 27th birthday, her present year. Her hands shook as she picked it up, Buddy lying stretched out near the hearth, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, the flickering light of the fire casting shadows over his sable coat and black coat. Rachel had opened so many of Evelyn's letters by now, each one a window into the woman's mind and heart. Some had been playful, written to the child Rachel once was, reminding her to stay curious. Others were stern, addressed to the teenager who had once doubted herself. Still others had been tender, offering guidance through the years when Rachel felt invisible. But this was the last. She unfolded it carefully, inhaling the faint trace of lavender that clung to the paper. Evelyn's favorite scent. "My dearest Rachel," the letter began, in that same looping hand. "If you are reading this, you are no longer the child who once clutched my skirts, or the young woman who walked uncertainly between shadows. If you are reading this, it means you have discovered what I left behind. You have found the library. You have read the words of Ruth, and perhaps you have felt the weight of what we guarded. This was never meant to be yours alone. Memories do not survive in silence. They survive when spoken, when shared, when passed from one hand to the next. Do not hold this house only as your refuge. Hold it as a bridge. Write the next chapter. Give others what was given to you." Rachel pressed the letter to her chest, tears spilling freely now. For weeks she had wrestled with choices, whether to sell, whether to stay, whether to keep the secrets buried or let them breathe. And here it was, Evelyn's final instruction, not simply to guard, but to reveal. The house was not a tomb, it was a beacon. Buddy rose and padded to the doorway, settling on the porch where the twilight air rolled in soft and cool. He lay down, ears flicking at the sound of distant crickets, his amber eyes calm, watchful. To Rachel he seemed like more than a dog at that moment. He was a sentinel, a witness to her turmoil and triumph alike, a bridge between past and present, just as Evelyn had asked her to be. Rachel let herself remember every detail, the creak of the stairs as she had followed Buddy into the library that first night, the dust rising from forgotten shelves, Tom Jacobs teaching her how to hammer nails straight, Agatha Brown's firm hand on hers telling her not to give up, and Dr. Green's reverent whisper as he declared the collection a treasure, each thread wove into a tapestry of belonging she hadn't felt in years. For so long she had seen herself as rootless, drifting from a cramped apartment to a job that drained her spirit. Now she saw the roots spread out beneath her feet, deep, ancient, and unbreakable. The wind stirred outside, rattling the branches against the window. Rachel thought of Michael, of his smirk and his contracts, of the way he had dismissed this place as worthless. She did not feel anger now, only pity. He could not see what she saw, what Evelyn had wanted her to see. To him, it was wood and stone. To her, it was story and soul. She picked up a pen from the table, the kind Evelyn had always used, heavy with ink and slightly scratchy against the page. She opened a blank notebook she had found in the library and wrote the first words of her own record. This house has memory, not of grandeur, but of grace. It was the sentence Evelyn had once written in a margin, and now it became her beginning. As she wrote, she heard the faint thump of Buddy's tail against the porch floorboards, steady and sure as if he approved. She smiled through her tears, letting the candle burn low beside her. She would not hoard this. She would preserve it, yes, but she would also share it, with scholars, with neighbors, with children yet to learn that history was not only battles and kings, but midwives, healers, and women who dared to keep others alive. By the time the fire had turned to embers, Rachel closed the letter carefully and placed it back in the wooden box. It was not an ending. It was a summons. Evelyn had given her a task, and she would answer it. She leaned back in her chair, Buddy's quiet breath echoing the rhythm of her own. And for the first time, she felt not the burden of inheritance, but its blessing. The morning air carried the crispness of autumn, cool but touched with the faint warmth of sunlight breaking through the thinning clouds. Rachel stood at the porch of the house, her grandmother's house, now more alive than it had been in decades. The repairs Tom Jacobs had guided her through had given the structure new strength. The roof no longer sagged, the porch steps felt solid underfoot, and the windows gleamed clear of grime. Yet the true change was not in the wood or the paint. It was in what lay beneath, in the library, hidden within the bones of the house, waiting to breathe in the presence of others. Today, for the first time, she would let them in. Buddy sat beside her, his sturdy frame steady, his coat brushed to a healthy shine, his amber eyes fixed on the gravel road. At 3 years old, the German Shepherd was in his prime, muscular yet graceful, with a calm intelligence that mirrored the steadiness Rachel had come to rely on. When the sound of tires crunching on gravel reached his ears pricked and his tail thumped once against the porch floor. Rachel's chest tightened. They were here. A white school bus pulled into the drive, its brakes squealing faintly before it hissed to a stop. The door swung open, and a line of children began to spill out, students from the local middle school, their faces alight with curiosity and nerves. At their head was their teacher, Sarah Mitchell. Sarah was a woman in her early 40s, tall and slender, with auburn hair that fell in waves to her shoulders. Her green eyes held both warmth and authority, and the freckles scattered across her pale skin spoke of years spent under the Carolina sun. She carried herself with the poise of someone who had weathered hardship yet never let it harden her spirit. Widowed 5 years earlier, after her husband's sudden accident, she had raised 2 children alone while continuing to teach. That loss had deepened her compassion, making her fiercely protective of her students and quick to recognize hidden potential in others. She greeted Rachel with a firm handshake and a smile that was genuine despite the long day ahead. "Rachel," she said, glancing around at the house with admiration, "thank you for doing this. The kids don't get to see much history outside a textbook. This will mean more than you know." Rachel nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "It means more to me that they're here. Come in." Inside, the fire already glowed in the hearth, filling the parlor with warmth. The children filed in, their voices hushed in instinctive awe. Some clutched notebooks, others whispered excitedly, their sneakers squeaking against the polished wood floors. Buddy patted among them, accepting gentle pats and scratches, his calm presence easing their nerves. Sarah kept a watchful eye, guiding them toward the stairwell that led down into the library. Rachel led the way. Each step downward echoed like the beat of a drum, a slow rhythm that carried the group into the heart of the house. When she pushed open the concealed door and lit the oil lamp on the low wooden table, gasps rose from the children. The secret room spread out before them, its shelves heavy with journals, bound volumes, and carefully labeled boxes. Dust motes danced in the lamplight, suspended like fragments of memory. The children moved cautiously, eyes wide. "It looks like something out of a storybook," one whispered. Another stretched a finger toward a leather-bound journal before pulling it back, afraid to touch. Rachel smiled, holding up a small book. "This is the diary of Ruth Holloway, my great-great-grandmother. She was a midwife in this very town more than a century ago. She helped deliver babies during storms, healed sickness with herbs from her garden, and sometimes hid people who needed safety. These shelves hold the lives of women who refused to be forgotten." The students leaned closer, enraptured. Sarah's eyes shone with quiet pride as she watched them. Rachel continued, moving slowly along the shelves, lifting volumes one by one, showing them the faded ink and pressed flowers between the pages. She told them of Evelyn's tireless caretaking, of Ruth's courage, of the generations who had chosen memory over oblivion. At one point, a boy with dark hair and nervous eyes raised his hand. "Why did they hide it?" he asked softly. Rachel crouched down so she could meet his gaze. Because not everyone wanted these stories to survive. History often chooses what to remember and what to forget. My family decided forgetting was not an option. They hid these words so one day someone like me, and now someone like you, could carry them forward. The boy nodded slowly, his shoulders straightening, with a pride he didn't seem to understand yet. Rachel guided them back to the table where she had placed a new notebook, its cover blank and waiting. She picked up her pen, her voice steady. "These letters, these journals, they brought me here. But today, I begin mine. I don't just inherit a house. I inherit the voices of those who came before me. And I accept the responsibility to share them with those who come after." She opened the notebook and wrote the first line aloud. "I was given memory not to guard in silence, but to give in truth." The children watched silently, the gravity of her words pressing gently into their young hearts. Sarah placed a hand on Rachel's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, of one woman to another, both marked by loss but carrying forward nonetheless. Later, when the bus rolled away and the yard was filled with quiet again, Rachel sat by the hearth with Buddy at her feet. The fire's glow bathed the room in amber light. She traced the words she had written in her notebook, her eyes damp, but her smile unshaken. For the first time since Evelyn's passing, she felt not just at home in the house, but at home in herself. She had stepped fully into the role her grandmother had prepared her for, not merely the heir of a building, but the keeper of memory and knowledge. Buddy sighed contentedly, his head resting on her boots, as if sealing the truth with his quiet companionship. The house, alive with firelight and voices from the past, welcomed her choice. Rachel leaned back, eyes closed, and whispered to the silence, "I'm home." In the end, Rachel discovered that a crumbling house was never just wood and stone. It was memory, love, and faith preserved through generations. Sometimes the true miracle from God is not thunder in the heavens, but the quiet reminder that our lives are part of a larger story. Just like Rachel, we are all called to honor what we inherit, to care for one another, and to believe that even in broken places, grace can bloom. In our daily lives, we may face burdens that feel too heavy, yet the Lord whispers, "You are not alone. I will make your weakness a strength." If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Write in the comments where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so these stories may continue to reach those who long for light in dark times. May God bless you and keep you, and may His quiet miracles guide your steps each day.